Hello world, I am here. And today I plan to talk about the astrology of parenting, which is what do we learn about parenting, good and bad, from the fundamental stuff in astrology, right? And the things that I want to cover, let's see, I have it in the text here at the bottom of the video. The things that I want to cover: the nature of individuality and karma, lessons that we get from Revatī nakṣatra, and the return cycles of the planets. These are real interesting. These are topics I want to touch on. Positive and negative parenting modes, importance of the definition of mother, definition of father, 10th, 4th house, extended family, 9th house, security, 2nd house. I'm going to touch on these topics. Hey Ricky, welcome. So what I'll do is I'll hit a topic. I'll start a topic, Frank, and then I'll talk about it for a couple of minutes and see if anybody has questions about it. All right, ready? So first thing I want to talk about as far as what astrology teaches about parenting. What I really learned. I guess what I'm going to talk about today is really what I learned about parenting from doing astrology. This particular thing is not just about parenting, but it's about people in general. But it's so important towards parenting. What astrology really teaches you is that each person is different. When you just look at one chart or if you don't know anything about charts or anything, you just think this is the way you live inside your own head, and you think this is the way people are, and this is the way the world is, and this is the way everything should be, the way it is in my head. But when you do astrology and look at all the charts, you see all the different possible ways that people can be, and that people, the way people can see, the way people can experience, the way people's subjectivity can work. And you start to notice that it's not like it's their choice to be stubborn or something. Like, let's say you have a kid. I mean, who has, the thing is, everybody thinks that they want to have the perfect child. But who has the perfect child? Nobody has the perfect child. There's almost like not even such a thing. So it's not like your child is choosing to be selfish. This is just something that, first of all, if you think about the topics I want to talk about today, like with the returns of planets, it's just something that their returns haven't matured them enough yet for them to understand. Or if you think about maybe their moon is in Aries and they're just argumentative. They're just angered easily. It's not like they chose, or that they're intentionally not being like a Pisces moon, right? That they're intentionally being an Aries moon. They're intentionally being confrontational with you and with everybody. This is the way that they're wired. So when you look at astrology, one of the most important things you learn about parenting or anything is that people are wired to be certain ways. They're hardwired. They have hardware. We have hardware and software. And the software is more adjustable than the hardware. So it lets you, one very important thing about astrology is not to try to make your child be somebody else than the person that they are. The thing about parenting is to help this person grow up and become who they want to be, who they need to be, and not force them into things that they can't do, or that they don't want to do, or that aren't natural to them. What comes naturally. Now, the way that genetics work, this could also be an interesting topic with parenting, is the child inherits traits from the father and the mother. So usually the way the mother and father see and think is, 50 to 100% of the way the child does too. But it's not always like that. All right, so the first lesson, to put it in a nutshell, and I'll see if you have any questions about this. What I'll do is I'll see if you have any questions about the thing I'm talking about. The first lesson is people are people, and people are different. And every child is different. So you can't try to make child A succeed in the way that child B succeeds, and you can't try to make child B succeed in the way child A succeeds. One person has one rising sign, one moon sign, one sun sign. The other person has a different one. One person has one chart, the other has another chart. So you can't change their basic natures. So let's see, do you have any questions about that? Is that clear? I turned down the latency, I think they call it, so that it's faster, so that you're hearing me talk more like live. So now, if you have any questions, I could probably see it right away. I have two daughters, Marina says. One has her moon in the 12th house, Virgo. The other has Ketu and moon conjunct in the 6th house, Libra. I believe we are very close, but those aspects worry me. So, this goes to the point that I was saying. It's not something to be. Don't worry about anything that a person has. Just let that person figure out how that person can grow to be the person. 12th house Libra. Well, maybe this girl can go study in libraries for a long time, or can stay in her room and think about things and stuff like that, and use that to her advantage. 6th house Libra, get her into sports, or maybe she'll be into sports medicine. Medicine, right? Maybe she'll be into medicine, how the body works. Play it by ear with the chart as your script to understand how things are going, and then encourage the child to do what it is that they're good at. Now, if you're thinking, a lot of thing about parenting is how does one child relate to the other child? They fight all the time. How do they relate to me? With this, you want to do synastry, and then it's almost basically the same synastry as you do for anything else. So like these two daughters are likely to be quite different, because Virgo and Libra are right next to each other, but it's not in a clashing manner. Don't forget, kids always clash. So everything is always relative, but it's not like this is going to be throughout their life, and when they grow up also they're going to clash. It's just that they're not going to really recognize the things that the other one recognizes as important. All right, let's see what else. Sarah. What would indicate a tendency for rigid parenting? Yeah, well, let's talk about that when we get into the planets. That's what I intend to talk about. Different styles from the different planets. You're definitely going to see Saturn and Mars for rigidity. My mother and step Jennifer. Yeah. So when we talk about Revatī nakṣatra, we're going to see how tragic that is for what Jennifer had to go through with parents that aren't good. Frank, is there a way to look at how they may be more receptive to the requests of the parents? How to ask towards their naturally receptive? How to ask them to do things in ways that they'll agree to? Yeah, this is where you'll need to be good at astrology and psychology, and you also have to realize that they're not your puppets. So it's not that they have to do everything that you ask, even though you're the parent. You have to I mean, we can talk about this with different parenting styles and the way the sun would do something, the way the moon would do something, the way Mercury would do something, the way the different planets would be a parent. Each one has its strengths and weaknesses. So you don't want to be all Mercury in your parenting, which means all equal, egalitarian, and friendly. But you don't want to have no Mercury in your parenting either. Right? You don't want to be all sun, which is all telling the person what to do, making decisions for them, showing them the right way to go. You don't want to do that all the way, 100%. The child needs to do some of that thinking and deciding and moving for themselves. But you don't want to have not enough of it either, right? So that's one thing, is that you need to realize that sometimes you don't want to be telling them what to do. You have to leave them some space to do whatever they want to do on their own. And then the other thing is, if you realize mostly where their moon is, you'll see what they'll respond to. But also think about, if you're thinking about discipline, how to get them to do what they're supposed to do, and think about the Mars that they have and that you have. And you'll see the strengths and weaknesses of your Mars and their Mars, and how the Marses relate. Because Mars is the planet that's really giving the discipline. Maybe perhaps the sun also. So for example, if your child may be very self-disciplining. If they have Mars in the third in a good sign. If they have Mars in the first in a good sign. If they have Mars in the sixth, Mars in the 10th, Mars in the 11th in good signs. They may be very self-disciplining. So you might want a child like that, you need to lay off and give them the chance to discipline themselves, to set their own schedules, etc. If they have weak Mars, if they have Mars in a bad sign in a weak house, like Mars in the 4th in a bad sign, then they're gonna be so stressed out if you don't help them make their schedules and you don't provide some rigidity and structure in their life. So this is another thing I'm talking about. Every child is individual. This is why I actually saw a funny thing somewhere on the internet the other day. It was a picture of like a mom taking care of a child, and it said, most parenting advice sucks. So here's our parenting advice. But the thing is, it's so true. Everybody knows most parenting advice sucks. And why is that? It's because everybody tries to be really specific about their parenting advice, and they're just talking about what works for in their experience with their one child, or two child, or 6 children. It's the reason why parenting advice doesn't really work is because every parent is different, and every child is different. So what's just perfect for one parent and child combination is absolutely terrible for another parent and child combination. That's what I'm saying about what astrology teaches you right off the bat, by seeing that every individual has a differently placed Mars. Every individual has a differently placed moon and sun. You learn that, hey, what works for this person, even if when you're growing up, when you're a parent and you're growing children, you're raising children, you have, let's say I have 3, right? What works for the first one doesn't work for the second one, and doesn't work for the third one. There's things that work for all 3, because these children have a lot of things in common. It's a very interesting thing to do with astrology, is to see from a chart how the DNA passes from parents to children, and how the nuggets and pieces of father and mother's chart wind up in the children's chart, and so siblings tend to have common themes. So there's some things that work for all 3, but there's some things that only work for one and not the other. And there's, every child is different, even from the same parents. Let's see what else we got here. Three. I have 3. Am I represented by moon in my kid's chart? Lavanya asks. Or the 4th house. If I want to see how I'm shown in the kid's chart, what should I check? So Lavanya, this is the first thing you have to learn about astrology, is that anything, whether it's you or whether it's an ankle bone, anything is represented multiple times in an astrology chart. There's what I call it symbolic redundancy. Like in technology, I don't know if you're into IT or anything, but like when you have important data, you put it in a redundant storage. So you're going to store it in a couple of places at the same time. So astrology is like that. There's redundant symbolism. Like the fourth house represents the mother, and the moon represents the mother, and the Lord of the fourth house represents the mother, and the D12 chart represents the mother, and the ninth house represents the parents, the D12 chart represents the parents, etc., right? So why, you're saying, which one should I look at? You have to look at, there's a few things you have to look at the mother. Why is that? Because the trick to doing astrology is to see how things synergize or clash with each other. So if you have only one symbol of a mother, like if you take the moon for example, then anything that affects the moon affects the mother, and you're done. But you'll be inaccurate in your interpretation with that. In 50% of the time, you'll be inaccurate. Let's say about 50% of the time, about half the time. So the moon represents the mother, and the fourth house represents the mother. So what affects the person's fourth house and what affects their moon? When you take those two things, what is in common between what's affecting the fourth house and affecting the moon? That's your answer. Now you're going to be accurate 75 or more % of the time with your thought about what it indicates about the mother. If it's showing that the mom is a super sweetheart because Venus is with the moon, and Venus is also aspecting the fourth house cusp, then you're pretty darn accurate and confident to say the mother is very loving. Let's say if it's a good Venus. And then also the fourth lord is doing something with Venus. It's in a Venus sign. So all three of the things that were about the mother got influenced by something similar, then that some similar thing is true. Or sometimes if you get a clash, you'll get like the moon is exalted in Taurus, but the fourth house has Mars and Saturn in it. So the moon exalted in Taurus can mean, well, this mother is so real and loving in a practical way, really takes care of the emotional and practical needs of the child. But Mars and Saturn in the fourth house means she's like a military sergeant. She's such a drill sergeant. So there's clash between those two symbols. There's some way that works out. There's some way that you can see that working out in a synergistic way, but there's some way that works out to clash with each other. So this is where the intellect of the interpreter comes in to understand how the symbols blend. And so where things clash, it would be like, when this is difficult, she tries to be loving, but she's so strict. And there's a clash between her strictness and her loving, and that's frustrating her and the child. Okay? All right, you know what I want to talk about next? What I want to talk about next are some specific things. I want to talk about Revatī, nakṣatra. So there's certain things in astrology that really speak to us about parenting. And of everything that I've seen, the most directly parenting related information that I've ever gotten from any astrological symbol is from Revatī nakṣatra. It was sort of not obvious or known to me actually until I studied the Nakṣatra Sutra. Okay? So, Revatī, the word means nourished. It means well fed. So, the sutra for Revatī is Pushan Revatī. So the deity, pretty much everybody knows this much, that the deity for Revatī is Pusha. And Pusha is who, what? We don't know. There's not that much surviving information about Pusha. But the word itself, I mean, we do know, I could tell you that, but first let me tell you what the word pusha means. The word itself, pusha, means to nourish, the nourisher. It's to feed. So like Revati is the fed, the well-fed, and pusha is the feeder. And sure enough, if you look at the surviving information about this god Pusha, he's the animal caretaker. He takes care of the animals. He feeds the animals. He gets milk from the cows. He's very milk associated, and he's a vegetarian. So he's very kind and nurturing and loving and things like that. And he's associated with cows and milk and goats, animals. Takes care of people, raises people, helps them grow. And then the sutra for Revati is Pushan Revati Vatsa Prastat Gava Avastat. So Vatsa and Gava. Now, in Sanskrit, the word for the parent's mood, the parental love, in Sanskrit is called Vatsalya. Right? Vatsalya. And this Revati Nakṣatra Sutra has the word Vatsa in it. Vatsa means literally calf. Yeah? Yeah, let me know if anybody's experiencing a lot of buffering, because I changed the buffer settings to be faster. So it may just be your internet connection, but if it's everybody, let me know and I'll switch it back. Because I wanted to make it a shorter buffer so that I can say, does anybody have any questions, and not have to wait like a minute before people have actually heard me. Vatsa means calf. So in Hindu, Indian mental imagery, there's nothing that epitomizes the mother more than a cow, and how the cow takes care of the calf. It really epitomizes parental love. So they actually call parental love calf love. I love of a calf, love of a child. Vatsa. So what Revatī nakṣatra needs is vats, which is calves. Why? Why does it need calves? For Gava, to make cows. So this nakṣatra is all about how you raise children to become adults. And the amazing twist to it is that what you put into the calf is what you get in the adult. Right? And then the person who's the adult then has calves, then has children. Right? The way that you feed a calf, the calf grows up to be a cow, then has a calf. So if you fed a calf very weakly, then the calf grows up to be a cow and has a really weak children, sickly children. Right? Now, think about what this means to parenting. My wife has this moon in Revatī, and she came up with this topic that she wanted to promote in Japan. She came up with a name for a topic called, in Japanese, Aijo Pocketto, which means the affection pocket. Because she realized, because she's Revatī, she's very sensitive to this topic. Because she has a Revatī moon, she's very sensitive to this topic. She really, really keenly realized that you get a pocket in your heart and you fill it up with affection, and then you have to take out from that same pocket to give affection to other people. And it's especially it's true for any kind of affection, but it's especially true for parenting. You cannot be a parent unless you've been parented well. You're going to flee from the idea of parenting. And it's almost comical how much the parent mimics the parenting that they got as a child. So then think about how that cycle is going to perpetuate itself. Like, if you want to think, what could I do that would impact the world? I want to do something that impacts the world. And then you think, let me go, be a political activist or create some amazing book or movie or art or something. You know what you can do that would impact the world the most? Take care of your kid. Yeah. Make your kid happy. Because if you make a happy kid, the world's going to have a happy adult. And then guess what? When the world has a happy adult, pretty soon it's going to have 2 happy kids. And then those 2 happy kids are going to become 2 happy adults. And then guess what? Pretty soon it's going to be 4 happy kids. And then they're going to grow up and there's going to be, 16 now or something, right? Each one's going to have 2. So, or whatever. Yeah, 6, I don't know, 2, 8. So, you see what I'm saying? This is the importance of parenting. So one thing that astrology teaches you is to say, hey, look, I know this is the modern era when we have video games, internet, Instagram, Facebook. There's all kinds of ways to be distracted 100% of the time. And it's like the super drug because you don't have a hangover. You can be distracted and forget your life 100% of the time. But guess what? Take care of your kid. Because the way that you take care of your kid is going to grow like a virus. Because that child is going to grow up carrying whatever you gave them. And then multiplying it. And then within 5 generations, it's going to have spread. So put a good bacteria into your child. All right. So, okay. So let's see. There's not really any questions about that, is there? Yeah. Let's see. I'll just take some random questions. Let's see what Ace 44 said. Oh yeah, Christopher. Advice for single parenting and co-parenting karmas. You can do it. It's not a problem. But you just have to realize that the child needs the 4th house and needs the 10th house. Hopefully, if the time is okay, we'll get to the, what does the 4th house say about parenting? What does the 10th house say about parenting? The child needs both. We can talk about that now a little bit. The child needs emotional care. And the child needs protection. And the 10th house is above, and it protects and disciplines. That's the father. The 4th house is below, and it holds up, supports, and nourishes. That's the mother. And the 10th house is in the world and in the sky, and the 4th house is underground, inside the heart. So a child needs emotional nourishment and security and stability. Typically, that's provided by the 4th house. Typically, that's provided by the female figure, the mother. Doesn't have to be in every case, but across the board sociologically, normally it's going to be parented by the mother, provided by the mother. The top one, the 10th house, the one that's giving protection and also the structure and the boundary, is typically provided by the male parent, the father. Doesn't have to be, but it typically is. It's typically there's 2 or more. Actually, if you have traditionalists saying you need 2 parents, you actually need like 8 parents to grow a child the right way. If you actually look at Vedic culture, there's not just 2 parents taking care of one child. 2 parents is exhausting. What to speak of 1 parent taking care of raising a child. 2 parents raising a child is exhausting. A real healthy way to raise a child is to have like 10 parents. 10 people. We're not just talking biological parents here, but the people that regularly care for and love the child throughout their childhood, not just once a week for a year. But you have nurses. In Vedic culture, you have aunts, uncles, nurses, grandmothers, all that live within like walking distance, or if not within the same house, and take care of the child. So it's very easy to get a blend of 10s and 4s taking care of you in different ways. And if it's not working with this one, you can go over to that one. So even just two parents is quite stressful. One parent is so stressful, but you can do it if you get a lot of inner inspiration to do so. You have to have a lot of love flowing out of your heart to be able to play the role that's not natural for your gender dynamic, whether it's physical gender or mental gender, and do both roles. Try to find a way to balance both roles, but it's possible, but not easy. Let's see. Yeah, now, okay, this is actually interesting. Marina, you brought this to my attention. And also, Matishka somebody had asked me to do this topic. And then somebody else, Matishka, you may know Matishka, she's frequently participates in our stuff. She couldn't come today, but she sent me a question by email. And it's similar to your question, Marina. It's like Marina says, my moon and sun are squared, right? So they're like at a 90 or 90 and 100, 270 degree angle to each other. So in Western astrology, that indicates that they're giving tension to each other, right? So her parents fight every single day. So growing up was tense. My youngest has the same square, and I didn't want to affect her how my parents did to me. So this was something that Matishka said. Matishka is a very accomplished person in the realm of psychology. So she said, it's not always true that the child becomes the parent. It's not always true that the parent parents in exactly the same way that they were parented. There are individuals who break the molds. But it's just like I said, to raise a child, it's good if you have an extended family, which is what the 9th house is. The extended family, that's where all the blessing is coming from. To raise a child is best if you have an extended family. It's not that if you don't have an extended family, you can't raise a child. It's just more difficult. You have to have more love, more consciousness, more volition, more intention to do what doesn't come natural. What all astrology or karma or fate shows us is what comes naturally. It doesn't say what happens. That's why you can't always make an accurate prediction. That's one of the reasons why. That's like the bottom line why it's impossible, theoretically impossible, to make a 100% accurate prediction. Because fate does not determine what happens, but what's natural. It determines the momentum of events. We know the momentum of the future by knowing the past and the present. So by knowing somebody's past and how they were raised and parented, you know the momentum that's affecting how they're going to be a parent. But you don't know for sure how much volition and love and consciousness they're going to exert to try to be different than what comes natural. Then I could give you some advice. Sorry, I got this new habit to spin my glasses around. I can give you some advice about how to break the pattern. And it's very like Chinese martial arts strategy. The Chinese martial arts strategy is break the thing in the easiest way. Where it's got a crack, break it there. And the way that it's coming at you, use the way that it's coming at you to break it. So if something is coming at you, trying to push you to the right, then throw it to the right. Right? That's like Chinese martial arts way of dealing with problems. So it's the same thing here. Like if you've got the moon and sun squared, so the way that it played out in your life is that the father and mother strongly didn't get along. But there are other ways that this can play out. So you can't change it into something that has nothing to... What I'm trying to say is you can't change it into something that has nothing to do with the sun and the moon squared. But you can change it into something that has another ramification or permutation of the sun and the moon squared. So think about the signs that the sun and the moon are in to get some specific inspiration about what is the thing I'm going to transform. I'm getting an attack that's trying to push me to the right. What I want to do with this is throw my enemy far away from me to the right. And then the specifics of how you're going to do that, you need to sort that out. You can do that with an astrologer, but it's not over a YouTube live thing. It's like they have to actually look at your chart and talk to you and figure it out. but you can get stability from a square rather than clash. You can get it's a 90-degree angle, so 90-degree angles are stable. Then the thing about they are sharp, so that's why it indicates pain and clashing, but they can also provide stability. They can be angular to each other. All right, so that's my advice there, is when you want to break the mold of how you've been raised, you try not to go off to be some totally different parent. Try to take, if only it had been this instead of that. Try to do that. I don't know if it makes sense, but it will still have the relationship, some relationship to the thing you experience. Let's see. What do old texts say about widows and orphans? There's no such thing as a widow and an orphan in a Vedic society. I mean, there are some orphans. But, okay, a widow and an orphan, it doesn't... In a Vedic society, the whole village becomes like a family, and the family is gigantic. So even if you lose your husband, it's not like you live by yourself, or even if you lose your wife, it's not like you're by yourself. Or even if your parents die, it's not like you have no family or no one to take care of you. In rare cases, there can be orphans. Now, in modern India, there's widows are a huge problem. Actually, in modern India, the extended family, they want to get rid of this idea because they're trying to modernize and become Western. So they're trying to separate everybody into consumer units. The smaller consumer units will sell more packages. So the extended family in India is falling apart. So what you see these days is they try to ship the widow out from their family so they don't have to take care of them. Just like in the West, we ship the old person to an old folks home, which sometimes is required just because you're not a nurse. And also it's just required because the Western society is not extended family. So it's very difficult to be the one burdened by taking care of the grandparent or something. But anyway, they do that now in India too. They ship off people, but they don't have old folks homes. They usually ship them to like a sacred place. So when you go to a sacred place in India, you're also always going to find lots of old ladies in white, wearing white, which is the sign that you are not married. All right. Let me talk about something else I wanted to talk about, which is the return cycles of the planets. I think this is very interesting to understanding how children grow and how you parent them. The understanding your child is really important to being a good parent. So children go through human beings, or probably any life on Earth, develops in a certain pattern, and it's helpful to know that pattern. And you can get a good pulse of the pattern by considering how the planets make their returns. So a return means it returns to the same spot where it started. So basically a return is a complete orbit. Okay? So the fastest return, of course, and you think about these will be milestones in the growth cycle of a child. So you should watch for the child's development. So the first return, of course, is just the return of the ascendant. Right? It's just one day. And a matter of fact, it's the most harrowing day in the parent's life is the first day. Most children die. The children that die early, they mostly die immediately or in that first day. So the first day is quite difficult to get through. But once you get past the first day, you've hit a milestone. This child is a day old. They survive for a day. So they're probably going to survive the rest of the cycles through this unit too. Of course, every time that cycle is going to go through, everything else in the chart is going to be in a different configuration. But at least they got through one. That gives us good confidence that they're going to get through the rest. And it's a very practical thing, like survival. the first return, the return of the ascendant, the first day. Then your next return is the moon's return. You're going to have to wait a month for this one. And so, sure enough, you'll notice as a parent, like after the first day, you kind of start counting towards the first month. And you want to see them get to the first month. Why is that? That's because that's the moon's cycle. That's the moon's circuit. It's going to make a return in a month. And once the moon makes its first return, the child becomes really capable of connecting with people. The emotional machine previous to a month is really not built. It's really so unfinished, the emotional machine, that the child is completely abstract. They're completely existing on an abstract level. The emotions are not focused at all until the moon makes its first return. Once the child makes the first return, once the moon makes the first return, you can expect the child to start responding to you emotionally. You see, previous to that, don't get frustrated that my child doesn't love me, etc., etc. My child's not even looking at me. They're staring off into space. It's because their moon hasn't even made its first growth cycle. The mind hasn't completed its circuits yet. But once it gets to the month, you should start to see that your child looks at you. And your child, you'll start to feel emotion and love coming back from the child after a month. And it's a frequent development. This is every month. This is the most important thing. The most important practical thing is to keep your child alive. That's your ascendant return. But that happens so fast. That's every day. You just feed the thing. You do things like feed, make sure they have enough to drink, make sure they have enough to eat, make sure they're not freezing or burning, etc. So every day you got to think about their ascendant, not their physical body. But make sure the next most important thing you're thinking about is their heart. That's what the moon represents, is your heart. In Sanskrit, we call it chitta. And chitta is this combination. It holds both the mind and the intelligence. It's the heart. So make sure you're thinking about the growth of their heart. That's the most important thing you can do for a child, is to make sure that they are actually happy. Happy is different than fun. Having fun usually corresponds to being happy, but not always, and it's not always the same. Like, you can actually have fun when you're very depressed. And then as soon as it's done, as soon as whatever you're doing is done, then you're immediately depressed again. So, because happy is just like the things that you're just experiencing something that brings you pleasure. Make sure the child is happy and that they're learning how to show you how they feel. Make sure they show you how they feel. So from a month forward, you start encouraging to show you how you feel, and you should be checking, especially in the early stages before you get your next return. Before you get to the first year, which is where you get a bunch of other returns, you really want to check every month that you're helping this child express emotions and feel emotions and express emotions. That's the most important parenting thing during the first year. Once you get to the first year mark, and then again, as a parent, you'll notice like these are the things that stick out in your mind. The first day was intense, the first month. Nobody remembers like, wow, my child turned 1 week. Yay. It's like, wow, they turned a month old. And then a little bit, it's like 6 months. But even when you get to the 6 month part, you're thinking, when are they going to get to a year? I want to count that thing. They get their first birthday. And so after the moon's return, the next return is going to be Sun, Mercury, and Venus. A more or less return at the same time. So these returns are more or less yearly, and that's why birthdays are so taken as milestones, because they really are. They're milestones of the Sun, Mercury, and Venus returning. So what should you expect as a milestone parenting when you get the child to a year? Well, here's where you start to think this child should have an identity by now. They're not just putty anymore. They're not just absorbing what I'm giving them. At a year, they should start to have identity. They should start to have sun. And here's where they should start to become a little bit independent from you. You see, it's even at a year mark that you start to let the child make some of its own decisions. Because the sun has made a return. It's ready to make a decision. Previous to a year, it would be ridiculous. You can't, and also Mercury is going to make its return at a year too, right? So what that's going to mean is here this child can start to verbalize and start to understand words. You usually don't start to speak until they get the second return. But in between the first Mercury return and the second Mercury return, they get familiar with words. So you can start rationalizing with them. You can start giving them intellect. Mercury signifies intellect. Previous to a year, it's just emotion. Just give emotion. Give food and water, take care of the ascendant, and give emotion. Make the child feel the warmth of your body, the love, express love. When you get to a year, start to give them ideas, start to check on their development of speech. And here's where they need to start learning Venus things, right? They're going to start to learn cooperating. It's not even going to be an issue previous to 1 year. They're not even going to have the tools to be able to cooperate with anybody. But after 1 year, they're going to start to learn how to cooperate. Now, watch what's going to happen with Mars. People are already talking about Mars, right? So Mars is the next return. Mars is like 2 years. 2.5 years. So this is why you get terrible 2s, which actually is more like terrible 3s. So most of the time, you're going to start to get anger. The child is going to want... This is where the Mars comes in, right? So the child is going to want to be their own person. At 1 year, they start to get an identity. But at 2.5, between 2 and 3, they start to want to be independent. They want that identity to be independent. So give it to them. This is the key. If you actually study politics, if you study Vedic politics, you'll learn a lot about parenting too, because being a king is basically the same as being a dad, right? So Vedic politics says that the way that you should first of all try to keep an enemy happy is to give them something. So if you have a problematic person, the first approach to controlling them, really is what the king wants to do, is to give them something that they want. Of course, you don't give them something that's important to you. You're not going to say, "Oh, you're my enemy. Here, have the throne." But you're my enemy, and you like lollipops. Well, I'm the king. I have tons of lollipops. Here's a lollipop. So you got to sort out what things can I give to this person. Now, also, if you're a parent, you also think, what things can I give to this person that's also not going to harm the person? Like, the child wants to play with knives. I have knives and I don't need the knives. All right, go ahead. You had your Mars return, play with knives. But you also have to think like, I don't want to give them too many lollipops. I don't want to always constantly give them ice cream. But you have to start giving, with the Mars return at 2.5 years, you have to start giving the child freedom and the ability and the space to be independent, pursue the things they want on their own. It's pretty early in the parenting cycle that you start to do it. You don't open the door and say, "Here, go out into the world. You're 2.5 years old now." But you start to let them be themselves. If you don't do that, you're going to get an angry child. So here is really where expertise comes in into making the child feel that the space that you give them is really important space, even though in truth it's not that important, because they're only 2.5 years old. You get my drift? As long as the child feels like, wow, my parents are letting me do this amazing thing by myself, then that child's going to be happy, even if it's just playing in their playpen by themselves without you looking over their shoulder. But you make a big deal out of it. Okay, so then there's going to be the cycles for these things, right? So you're going to see at least the second Mercury return is going to be super, super important because it's coming before the next major return. So at least by 2 years old, a child should start to be using words and able to make decisions on their own. That's the Sun return. They should start to have a clear identity, that they know who they are, they express who they are, they don't want to be somebody else. And they should start to be able to cooperate. That's the Venus return. So it's between the first year and the second year that you work on all these things. Being able to cooperate and share, being able to make a decision, and being able to talk. Then when you get past 2, you start to think about how can you be responsible and do your own thing. That's the Mars return. That's going to happen again around 5. And you're not going to have another significant return before that. So the second Mars return is another important one. So right after the second Mars return, that's basically where they get it under control. And it's interesting that we time our school system. Most places in the world time their school system so the kids start to go to school around the second Mars return. Because it's natural that around that time they start to be capable of actually going out, being outside of the house. Okay, so it's interesting to know these returns, right? Then the next one after Mars is Jupiter. Then there's a long time. So you see, once you're about 6 years old until you're about 12, which is the first Jupiter's return, there's just a lot of the same thing going on. And it's just like a lot of the same thing. You just keep working on your Venus returns, you keep working on your Mercury returns, etc. Of course, every day you still need your food, your water, and all that stuff. And you still need emotional growth. But every day you're just working on improving your language skills, improving your counting, improving your cooperation, teamwork. With Venus, solidifying your identity, improving your decision-making skills until you get to 12. Then Jupiter comes around. Jupiter is the planet of reproduction. Jupiter is the planet of children. So guess what happens when people turn 12? They get hair in their private parts. They grow private parts. They get sexually activated. They get puberty. So then the whole ballgame changes. Now once you're 12, you become the teenager, right? That's why we say, well, now you're a teenager. So you're almost complete when you get to 12. You start to become a person. You've grown all the way. That's Jupiter's significance, that you've grown all the way now. You're mature. Actually, a 12-year-old is very mature. But they haven't finished. They still have a return that... What is Rahu? And Rahu is also going to happen. It's going to be 9. Because it's going to be a Rahu Ketu flip thing. It's going to be 9 years old. So you might get a bump at 9, but it's usually not till 18 that you get a real Rahu Ketu thing. You get a little bump around 10 or something. 12, it starts to get a little iffy. It's probably because of the Rahu Ketu half return. Then Jupiter comes around 12. They become teenagers. They're full grown. In most ways, they can make babies of their own. From 12 or 13, it starts to become possible. Now, but they still haven't had the Rahu return. They still haven't had the Saturn return. So they're not. Everybody has their first fist fight at different ages. But it's usually your first fist fight, to be honest, if you think about it, it's probably when you were about 2.5 years old. It's probably in between your first and second Mars return. Whether it's a fist or clawing or just something, but probably your first intense fight right around there. So what else was I going to say? Yeah, so typically what you have, the 12-year-old is like, all right, you start higher education, you start your high school, and your education gets more specified. That's one thing that happens these days. The old days, it was like, okay, now you can reproduce. But they start to get independence, but they're not fully complete. So it's this weird time. The teenage years, pre-18 teenage years,
is this weird time where they're an adult, but they're not an adult because they still haven't finished all the returns. So as a parent, what do? You just start to treat them that way. Like, it's the same thing as the first Mars return, just on a grander scale. You start to let them be an adult, but you are watching them, helping them from the back. Help them in ways that that doesn't make them feel like you're helping them. Then at 18, you're just going to expect that this child is going to rebel, because that's the Rahu return. So around that 18 mark, children usually get really rebellious, do something wild, do something different than you expected, suddenly change. That's the Rahu return. That's fine. Just let it be. And then the final maturity comes at about 27. Yeah? Am I wrong? It's 27, right? When Saturn has its return. When Saturn has your first return, you've finally gone through all of your returns. So really, if you want to know the full growth cycle for a child, it goes up to 27. But after they get to 18, they're going to go out on their own. To a large extent, you're not really going to have to be there as much. But it's not really until they're set in their own career and job, etc., which usually doesn't happen to a person until they get their Saturn return, that you can really say, okay, my child's all grown up. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I wanted to talk about something else too. I wanted to talk about the positive and negative parenting model. Yeah, at least let me just mention this real fast. The positive and negative parenting model is signified by Jupiter and Saturn. There's two parenting models, or you can Jupiter, Saturn. You can also see the same dichotomy in Venus versus Mars, and you can even see the same dichotomy in Moon versus Sun. Okay, so you put all these planets into two groups. You got Sun, Mars, and Saturn as one type of parenting technique, which, as you can tell, is very discipline oriented because of Mars, and very crisp and clear and decisive because of the Sun. And I'm really glad to hear these comments. And is actually kind of negative and critical because of Saturn. Now, you may think, oh God, that's bad. But it's not bad. This is a parenting model. And then there's the other model. That's the Moon, Venus, and Jupiter. So it's going to be very optimistic because of Jupiter. Where the other parenting model is pessimistic. You're going to go wrong unless I help you. And you're making these mistakes. That's the Saturn model. And the Jupiter model is encouraging. You can do it. You can, it's going to be okay, and you can do it. It's the Jupiter model. You have these great assets, encouraging the assets. Jupiter, Venus, I love you. I'm here for you. Whatever you need, I'll help you do it. And then Moon, it's just caring about how the person feels, mostly, more than what they're actually doing. You're caring about how they feel. That's the other parenting model. Now, some of you might be in favor of one or the other, because maybe you went through a dysfunctional one or the other, so you want to point to the other one. Or for whatever reason, we may be in favor of one parenting model or the other. But the important thing that the Vedas teach, there's an Upanishad called the Isha Upanishad. And the Isha Upanishad says, if you don't have negativity and positivity working together, you'll never get to the goal. This is an important lesson for parenting and for anything, that negativity is important. You have to be able to say, that's a mistake, or you can't do that. You can't fly. You don't have wings. You have to be able to tell the child, not like, yeah, I think you can do it if you really believe in yourself. Go ahead and jump. You can't just only have the full Jupiter and none of the Saturn. And you can't only have the Saturn and none of the Jupiter. So you have to have a balance. And don't idealize one parenting model over the other. I wish I was a more disciplined parent. If I'm the most disciplined parent, then I'll be the best parent. You have to have all of these skills. That's the thing about parenting that makes it difficult. You have to have all the skills of all the planets. You have to be the sun, and you have to be able to make a decision and stick to it. You have to be the moon and be sensitive to the person, how the person feels. You have to have Mars, to provide the child discipline. But you have to, and the one that goes, the way the two planets make the pairs is very important to understand how you have to balance the things out. So, for example, the sun is like making the decisions, providing the structure in the family. So, like being the financial things like that come from the sun, stability. You have to have that, but the way that it has to be balanced is by the moon, feeling. So don't make decisions for the family or for the child without actually being sensitive to how they feel. You do have to make decisions for the child, and you also have to be sensitive to how they feel. So make the decisions for the child by being sensitive to how they feel. So Mars is the discipline, Venus is the cooperation. So you discipline a child cooperatively. Figure out a way that it doesn't feel like discipline to them, that it feels like they're getting what they want, that it feels like you're giving something to them. So discipline them in a trick. You can't be stupid. You have to be smart and creative with how you deal with people, especially children. And then the Jupiter and Saturn, you have to be able to point out their mistakes and their flaws, but you also have to be able to encourage their strong points. So if you're going to point out a mistake and a flaw, make sure you can also point out something to be encouraged on. All right. Yeah, this was a really interesting topic. Took longer than I thought. One more thing I want to say is the planet that's at the bottom of it all, the house that's at the bottom of it all is the fourth. The planet that's at the root of everything is the moon. So if you fail in everything as a parent, just don't fail in the fourth house. If you because nobody's good, nobody's perfect, and nobody's even really all that good. So if you fail, we're going to fail all over the place. If you fail everywhere, just make sure you don't fail in the fourth house, which is the emotional care. Showing the person that you care about them by paying attention to them. So just pay attention to your child. Give your child some of your eyeball time. Look at them. Let them see that you're looking at them. Hug them. Say you're sorry. Say you're happy. Say congratulations. Spend the time with the child. Show the child that you care. Then even if you make a ton of other mistakes, the child's going to feel like, yeah, you know what, but everybody makes mistakes, but my child loves me. And then that's the Aijo pocket, though. That's the Revatī nakṣatra. They're going to be able to also make mistakes when they grow up, but still get the basic fundamental thing right. All right, guys. This was exciting. Good. So thank you, everybody, for participating. Yeah. See, we actually covered a lot of things. I encourage everybody to go back and watch this in the recorded version. We went over a lot of things. There's a lot of things to put together. How every child is an individual. You can't treat them all the same. A lot of different things were really important. So I'll see you next week, right? Next week will be same time, same station. We'll do our live session, and midweek I'll give you another video about the nakshatras. Hare Krishna, thank you.